Okay, so we are holding today on, we're going to do Daf Ayin Aleph. We're holding on the very bottom of Daf Ayin Amud Bet. Yesterday we discussed that an Arel cannot have Truma. We learned from Korban Pesach we have a Gzera Shava. Now through the course of what we were learning yesterday, the Gemara mentioned that there's a pasuk by Korban Pesach. It says Umalta oto az yochal bo, that if you have an Eved, you have to give him Milah first before you can eat the Korban Pesach. So we learned that only applies to Korban Pesach because it says Bo for it, right? Az yochal bo. But other things, you don't need to give a Milah to your Avadim and your children to eat. So that halacha of giving a Milah to Avadim and children only applies to a Korban Pesach, not to Truma. So we learned that from the word Bo. So says the Gemara, the very, very bottom of Daf Ayin Amud Bet. The Gemara says, Hashda da'amrat bo lidrashahu da'ata. Once we say that the word bo is coming to teach me a drasha, that this halacha only applies here and not elsewhere, kol ben nechar lo yochal bo lamali. The pasuk says by Korban Pesach, kol ben nechar lo yochal bo. Someone who's a ben nechar, who, the way the Gemara is understanding, that Ben Nechar is someone who is off the derech, quote unquote. He's a mumar. He doesn't believe in certain principles of Yiddishkeit. So he's not allowed to eat Korban Pesach. So what's the drasha of bo? It says kol ben nechar lo yochal bo. A ben nechar is not allowed to eat Korban Pesach. So says the Gemara, bo hamarat dat poselet. By Korban Pesach, if someone is a mumar, he's pasul. Vein hamarat dat poselet b'maaser, but not for maaser. Someone is allowed to still eat maaserot even though he's a mumar. Now the Gemara says, okay, another pasuk, kol arel lo yochal bo lamali. It says by Korban Pesach, an Arel cannot eat it. Sounds like an Arel can eat something else. What were we referring to? So, bo eno ochel, aval ochelhu b'matzah u'maror. He's not allowed to eat the Korban Pesach, but he still eats matzah and maror. Even though Korban Pesach comes together with matzah and maror, it says al matzot u'marorim yocheluhu. Still, we say that this Kol arel lo yochal bo only applies to Korban Pesach, but not to matzah. V'yitzterich lemichtav arel, v'yitzterich lemichtav kol ben nechar. And I need a pasuk to tell me that an arel cannot have Korban Pesach, and I also need a pasuk to tell me ben nechar, someone who's a mumar, cannot eat Korban Pesach. Why? So I cannot learn one from the other. Says the Gemara, De'ikatav rachamana arel. If the Torah would have only taught that an arel cannot eat Korban Pesach, mishum de ma'is, because it's ma'us to Hashem that he left his orla. It's disgusting to Hashem. Aval ben nechar de lo ma'is, but a ben nechar, he doesn't have anything disgusting on his body. He has a milah. So ema lo, I would think no, he's not excluded and he can eat Korban Pesach. V'katav rachamana kol ben nechar mishum de'en libo l'shamayim. And if the Torah would have just said someone who's a mumar cannot eat Korban Pesach, I would have thought, okay, his heart is not in the right place. He doesn't have the right Torah hashkafot. Aval arel de libo l'shamayim, but an arel that he could be a Talmid Chacham. He just doesn't have a milah. His brothers died because of milah. He doesn't have one. But he could be libo shamayim emalo. I would think that he's not excluded and he can eat Korban Pesach tzricha. Therefore, you need both. So I need two psukim. One to teach. I have multiple psukim to teach me different things about Korban Pesach. But one of them is to teach me an arel cannot eat Korban Pesach, and one of them is to teach me ben nechar, someone who's a mumar, also cannot eat Korban Pesach. Okay, further. Okay, mimenu. It says that you're not allowed to eat the Korban Pesach raw. It says al tochlu mimenu na. So mimenu sounds like you cannot eat from it, but you can eat from something else. So mimenu lamali. Why do I need that pasuk? What's it coming to teach me? lekede Rabba Amar Rabbi Yitzchak. It's coming to teach me the halacha of Rabba Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, which the Gemara does not bring over here. We're going to come across it in a few dapim, but the Gemara is telling us that there's a reason why we have the word mimenu. It's because we need it for the teaching of Rabba, and that's later on. Okay, Amar Mar. Now the Gemara is going to go back to the original Braita that we brought. We started off this perek with a Braita. The Braita said that how do we know that an Arel is not allowed to eat Truma? So one limud was, it says Toshav and Sachir by Korban Pesach, and it also says Toshav and Sachir by Truma. So we apply the halacha of Korban Pesach that an Arel cannot eat to Truma. Rabbi Akiva said a different understanding. Rabbi Akiva said, I don't need that Toshav and Sachir drasha. I have a different drasha. The pasuk says, Ish, any person who is tameh, he cannot eat truma. So Ish, any person, is coming to include an Arel also, that he is like a tameh and he cannot eat truma. So the Gemara is now quoting Rabbi Akiva's opinion. Amar Mar, Rabbi Akiva Omer El Tzarich. Rabbi Akiva said, you don't need the Gzera Shava of Toshav and Sachir to teach me that an Arel cannot eat Truma. Harehu Omer, Ish L'rabot et ha'arel. The Pasuk says, Ish, any person who is Tameh, and it says Ish a second time to include an Arel, that an Arel is like a Tameh, and the same way that a Tameh cannot eat Truma, an Arel also cannot eat Truma. So the Gemara asks, why don't we say that Ish is coming to include an Onen, that an Onen is like a Tameh and he cannot eat Truma? So Amar Yosef Rechanina Amar Kra V'chol Zar Zarut Amarti Lachav Lo Aninut. We have a different drasha that teaches us that an Onen is allowed to eat Truma. So the Gemara says, Ema Lo Arlut. Why don't we use that drasha to teach me that an Arel is allowed to eat Truma? So Haktiv Ish. No, but we have another drasha that says Ish. So basically we have a drasha Ish that is coming to include someone else has the status of a Tameh and cannot eat Truma. Now we have a pasuk of V'chol Zar to tell me no, only a Zar cannot eat, but there's someone else who can eat Truma. So basically we have one drasha telling me there's a person who cannot eat Truma, and one drasha telling me there's a person who can eat Truma. We had this very same back and forth yesterday in the opinion of the Chachamim. Now we're just doing it in Rabbi Akiva. That how come we're choosing the drasha that tells us someone is not allowed to eat Truma to say it's an Arel, and the drasha that somebody is allowed to eat Truma to say that it's a Onen? Maybe it's the other way around. Maybe an Onen should be the one that doesn't eat Truma, and Arel eats. So the Gemara says, Umar, right? What do we see to choose that the Arel is the one that doesn't eat Truma, and the Onen eats? Mistabra Arlut Havla L'Rebuye. It makes sense that an Arel should be included in the Isur of eating Truma. Sheken Maasim Krutim B'Devar Eved. We have these simanim. Mechusar Maaseh. It's an Arel is Mechusar Maaseh. He's missing a Maaseh. There's an action that he has to do to take care of his Orla. Maaseh Begufo, and that's an action that he has to do on his body. As opposed to an Onen, there's no action that he has to do to his body to make himself not an Onen anymore. V'onesh Karet. Mila also is Karet. And also Mila is something that was even before Matan Torah. It was given to Avram Avinu. And also Milat Zecharav V'avadav Me'akevet. And also that by Mila we find the concept that for Korban Pesach he has to give Mila to his children and his Avadim also. So you see Mila has these...
Is it few for the owner to give the Brit Mila to Evet? Evet doesn't want to be Jewish.
Yeah, so that's a different story. He has to give a Brit Milah, and especially for Korban Pesach, he has to make sure that all of his avadim and his sons have Brit Milah in order to bring and eat Korban Pesach.
Is the Evet supposed to be Jewish?
An Eved has, I'm saying he's an Eved. That's his,
yeah. What's the reason I'm going to give him Brit Milah? Why?
He's chayav in mitzvot to a certain degree, and also Milah. No, he's chayav in mitzvot like an isha. He's not allowed to do lo ta'aseh. He has that's his status. His status as an Eved Kanani is that. So the Gemara says, okay, you're giving me a bunch of reasons why I should include an Arel. Says the Gemara, Adarabba, Aninuta v'lel rebuya. I'll tell you some reasons why we should include an Onen. Sheken yeshna b'chol sha'a. Number one, an Aninut is something that can happen at any time. It's not like a Orla that, it's a once in a lifetime thing. It could happen multiple times. V'noheged b'anashim v'nashim, and also aninut, being an onen, applies to a man and a woman. Also, ve'en biyado letaken atzmo. It's not like milad that he could just fix it. By aninut, there's nothing he can do to fix it. So the Gemara says, you're right. Aninut also, onen also has some reasons why it's more strict than orla, but still, hanach nefishin, the stringencies of orla are more. Therefore, we include orla as the isur to eat truma. So Rava Amar Belo Anach Nefishin Nami Lo Matzit Amrit. Rava says even without it being that an arel has more stringencies than an onen, still I'm not able to say, we can't say that the pasuk is coming to include an onen for isur truma. Why? Amar Kra Ish Ish. Ezu davar sheyeshnu beish ve'eno beisha v'omer zarlut. The pasuk, the whole drasha we're coming off of is we're saying ish that it says ish mizer aron ve'utzaru ozav, someone who is basically tameh. So we're saying we're including someone else like a tameh, and we're using the word ish. So it makes sense that it's something that applies only to an ish, which would be arlut, which would be an arel, not an onen, because an onen could apply to a woman also. Okay, now the Gemara says, fine. Rabbi Akiva, hay toshav v'sachir mayavidle. What does Rabbi Akiva do with this toshav v'sachir? We had two ways of learning, right? We had machloket chachamim, or Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Akiva. First opinion, which was yesterday's amud, was that we learn toshav v'sachir, it says by korban pesach and by truma. So we learn just like by truma, just like by korban pesach, an arel is asur to eat it. Also by truma, an arel is asur to eat it. And then it also that was first opinion. So Rabbi Akiva's opinion is we don't learn from toshav and sachir. We learn from ish that an arel is not allowed to eat truma. So the Gemara asks now, Rabbi Akiva, hay toshav v'sachir mayavidle. What does Rabbi Akiva do with the words toshav v'sachir? Right? What does he do with that? He's not using it for a drasha to teach me that you need that an arel cannot eat truma, because he learns that from someplace else. So what does he do with those words? So Amar Rav Shemaya la'atui Aravi ma'ul ve'givoni ma'ul. It's coming to include an Aravi or a Givoni, other nations that have Brit Milah, they're not allowed to eat Korban Pesach. That's what he learns from Toshav and Sachir. That even if they have a Brit Milah, but other nations are not allowed to eat from it. So the Gemara says, what? V'hani mulininu, what? You're going to call these people, even though they have a Brit Milah, they're not called, they're still called Arelim. V'hatanan, konam shani nehene la'arelim. The Gemara says, I'm going to prove to you that they're called Arelim. Because let's say somebody makes a neder. What's his neder? That I'm not going to have any hana'ah from any arel. So mutar ba'areli Yisrael v'asur ba'areli ovdei kochavim.
Why kind of neder is that?
It doesn't matter. The point is he makes such a that's what he says. He said, I make a neder. I'm not having any hana'ah from any areli. So the Gemara says what he means is he's mutar to have hana'ah from any Yisrael, even if the Yisrael is an arel, and asur b'mulei ovdei kochavim, and he's not allowed to have hana'ah from goyim, even if they have a brit milah. Meaning when we say arel, it means
we didn't make the brit milah.
Right, but in the context of nidarim, when a person says arel, he means someone who's a goy. even if they have a Brit Milah. When he says Arel, he means them also. So we're showing that we're showing that Arel is referring to even Goyim that have a Brit Milah can still be referred to as Arel. Right? Also, if he says Konam Shani Ne'ene Lemulin, if he says, I'm not going to have any Hana'ah from anyone who has a Brit Milah, so he's referring to all Yisrael. And Mutar B'molei Ovdei Kochavim, he's allowed to have Hana'ah from Ovdei Kochavim who have Brit Milah, V'asur B'alei Yisrael, he's not allowed to have Hana'ah from Arelei Yisrael. So the point is that you see that when we say Arel, Goyim that have a Brit Milah they still fall under the category of Arel. So it can't be that Rabbi Kiva is using the words Toshav v'Sachir to teach me that Arel Oved Kochavim is not allowed to eat. I'm sorry, that Oved Kochavim that has a Brit Milah is not allowed to eat Korban Pesach. Of course they're not allowed to eat. We know that just because they're called Arelim. So Ella, why does he need the words Toshav v'Sachir? La'atuye ger shemal velo taval. It's coming to include a ger that he had a Brit Milah, but he didn't yet go to the mikveh. V'katan shenolad kishehu mahul. And also a katan that had a Brit Milah when he was born. So those two cases, that's what Rabbi Kiva is saying, that they cannot eat Korban Pesach. Right? A ger that he went to the mikveh, but he didn't have, he got Brit Milah, but he didn't go to the mikveh yet. And the katan that he was born with a Brit Milah. And Rabbi Kiva holds that a katan who was born with a Brit Milah, you need to take dam out for the purpose of Brit Milah. So Rabbi Kiva is using these words, Toshav v'Sachir, to teach me that a ger that went to the he got a Brit Milah, but he didn't go to the mikveh yet, he's not allowed to eat Korban Pesach. And a katan who was born with a Brit Milah, he's not allowed to eat Korban Pesach until they take out a drop of blood. That's what Rabbi Kiva learns from the words Toshav v'Sachir.
Why the Orlaj is very important for the Korban Pesach and anything else?
Okay, good question. Let's maybe talk about it afterwards. Let's finish the Amud. No, it's a good question. I have some thoughts on it. Let's talk about it afterwards. Let's finish the Amud. Rabbi Eliezer, Hi ish my avidle. So what does Rabbi Eliezer do with the Rabbi Kiva's pasuk of ish? So Dibra Torah Kilshon Bnei Adam. The Torah speaks in the words of Bnei Adam. Meaning sometimes the Torah will use phrases that are the way that people speak, and it's not necessarily made for a drasha. Okay, now let's just start the next piece of Gemara. Bai Rav Chama Bar Ukva. Rav Chama Bar Ukva asked the following question. Interesting question. Katan Arel Ma'u lesochu b'shemen shemen shel truma. So let's say you have a baby that's born, that he's a Arel. Meaning, we're talking about somebody who's under 8 days. His time for Brit Milah didn't come yet. So when we say that an Arel is not allowed to eat truma, or use truma, what about an Arel who his zman for Brit Milah didn't come yet? He's a new baby, 2 days old. Are you allowed to put truma oil on him? Because putting oil, lathering with oil, is like eating truma. The Gemara says that we learn from a pasuk that sicha kishtiya, that when you put oil, that has getting absorbed in your body, that has the same status as eating it, when it comes to truma at least. So that's his question. Can you use truma to put oil on a baby that doesn't have a Brit Milah, he's too young? So Arlut Shelo Bizmana Ma'akeva, if he's an Arel, but it's before the time that he's supposed to have Brit Milah. So does that make it that he cannot eat truma? Or lo me'akeva, or no, we don't care about that. So Amar Rabbi Zera Tashema. Rabbi Zera says, "Come, I have a proof that I have a proof to this question. En li ella milat zecharav b'shat asiyah v'avadav b'shat achila." Now, if you look at the psukim by Korban Pesach, so it says that he has to give his sons a Brit Milah, and it also says that he has to give his avadim a Brit Milah. Boker Tov. So, if you notice in the psukim, the pasuk that says that he has to give his sons a Brit Milah, it says, "V'chi aguri techager v'asa pesach himol lo kol zachar." Give a brit milah to all of the sons, va'az yikrav la'asoto, and then you can bring the korban pesach. And when it comes to giving milah to avadim, it says, "V'chol eved ish miknat kasef umalta oto az yochal bo." It says for the avadim, you give him a brit milah, and then you can eat the korban pesach. So one says give a brit milah to your children before you bring it, and the other one says give a brit milah to your avadim before you eat it. So says the Gemara, minayin litenet ta'amur shel ze beze ve'ta'amur shel ze beze. How do we know that the avadim also have to have a milah before you even bring it? That whatever we're saying by sons applies to avadim. So the avadim need to have a milah before you even bring it, and the sons need to have a milah before you eat it. So Talmud Lomar az. It says az by both. Az yikrav la'asoto, or az yochal bo. Right? But it says az. So we learn ligzera shava. So now basically that's the braita, that what's said by avadim applies to sons, and what's said by sons applies to avadim. So they have to have a milah before you eat it, and also before you bring it. Now, before you bring the korban pesach, before you do shchita. So now, the question is like this: how do you have
Who brings the korban pesach?
the father? So he has to. His sons have to have milah, and his avadim have to have milah before he brings it, and they also have to have milah before he eats it. So there's a few hours between when he brings it and when he eats it. So the Gemara is gonna explain. It's possible. So it says bishlama avadav. It makes sense by avadim mishkachat la didnu b'shat achila v'idnu b'shat asiyah. You can have avadim that when you brought the korban pesach, you didn't own this eved, and then you bought the eved, and then he's there for eating it. So you can have a case where the eved he's not your eved when you're shechting the korban pesach, but he is your eved when you're eating the korban pesach. So the Torah needs to tell me he needs to have a milah both before you bring it and before you shecht it, in case he wasn't your eved when you were bringing the korban pesach, right? Kigon dezavninu bene bene. You could have a case where he bought the eved in between. He did shchita of his korban pesach. He bought an eved, and then that night he's going to eat it. He has to give him a milah before he eats it. But how do you apply this to his sons? How do you have a child that he's there at the time of the eating of the korban pesach, but he's not there at the time of the bringing of the korban pesach? How do you have such a case? If we're talking about that the child is born in between, he brings the korban pesach and then the child is born, well, he's not old enough to have brit milah yet.
Oh yeah.
He's
did
not 8 days yet.
Did we answer this question yet? Did I miss that or no? I'm
This is what we're discussing right now.
Okay.
We're trying to figure out if somebody is too young to have a brit milah.
Yeah.
Does the father does that still prevent the father from bringing korban pesach or no?
That's what I was wondering.
That's the question. So the Gemara is trying to prove. You see over here a case. We're saying that if the child is not there during the bringing of the korban pesach, but he's there for the eating of the korban pesach, you can't eat it if he doesn't have a brit milah. So the Gemara says, Heichi mishkachad. How do you have this case by a child? Lav dityalud ben asiyah la'achila. The case must be that the child is born between the time he brought the korban pesach and the time he's eating it. Right? He brought the korban pesach. They shechted it. The child was born a couple hours later, and then that night he's eating it. So he can't eat it because he has a child that doesn't have a brit milah. So the Gemara says, Shema mina. Arlut shelo bizmana havya arlut. You see from here that arel, arlut, someone not having a brit milah, but it's not even the time yet to have a brit milah, that's still considered an arel, and it still prevents the father from eating korban pesach. So the Gemara is going to reject this and give a few different explanations. So Amar Rava. V'tisbera, Rava says not. Does that make any sense? Doesn't make sense. Himol lo kol zachar amar achmana v'azikrav la'asoto v'haylav bar mehilahu. The Torah says you have to give a brit milah to your sons before you bring korban pesach. You're not allowed to. You cannot give a brit milah. It's too early. So it doesn't make sense that this would prevent the father from eating the korban pesach. So ella hacha b'maya askinan. So what's the case that we're talking about when we say you have a child who's not an arel at the time of the bringing of the korban pesach, but he is an arel at the time of the eating of the korban pesach? How could you have such a case? So says the Gemara, kegon
The baby has
shechaltzato
to be
chama.
born right away. Not even 8 days yet. 8 days
Well,
4
that's
days.
what we thought originally, but the Gemara is going to give a different understanding. That you can have someone who the child is not an arel at the time of the bringing of the korban pesach, but he is an arel later on when you're eating it. How do you have such a case? So the Gemara says, kegon shechaltzato chama. The case is that the child was sick, and he got
Was
healed
born
during that time. So long as he's sick, he's not allowed to have a brit milah.
Yeah.
Now he became healed, so you give him a brit milah. So right now the understanding is during the time of the shechting of the korban pesach, he was sick.
Right.
So he's not called an arel because it wasn't the time to have a brit milah.
So if you're sick and you're an RL, then you're not a real RL.
If you never had a zman to have a brit milah, we're not talking about an adult who's an arel who's sick. We're talking about a child who the zman of brit milah never came because he never got to the zman yet. Right?
So he's never got to this Zman and he's also sick.
No. He's never got to the zman because we're gonna get to it. Right now, we're assuming that he's supposed to have brit milah on that day. Right now, the assumption is this is the 8th day, but he's sick, so it has to be postponed. So as long as it has to be postponed because he's sick, then that's not gonna block the father from eating korban pesach.
We haven't addressed the question about a baby that's like 2 days old.
No, so this is addressing the question.
Okay,
What we're
sorry.
saying, once we're giving this explanation of we tried to bring a proof that a child who's even younger also is considered an arel, but the Gemara is now rejecting that proof and saying that's not true. It's not true. Really, anyone who's never reached the zman of having a brit milah, they're not considered an arel. The parents are allowed to bring korban pesach and eat korban pesach. And this case is talking about someone who's sick, and therefore the child was
like
not.
Because of extenuating circumstances, it's okay. Therefore, in the regular 8 days, it's okay.
It's not really a kal v'chomer. It's just saying that that's the halacha across the board. The Gemara is just finding the case. Right now, our focus is we're finding a case where the child is not considered an arel at the time that they're bringing korban pesach, but he is considered an arel at the time that we're eating korban pesach. So the case is shechaltzato chama. He was sick in the morning. He couldn't have a brit milah, and then later on, he got healed. So you see that. Right, that's the case where he's not considered an arel in the morning because he was sick. He never had it's not the zman milah yet. But when he became healed, he could get a brit milah, and now he blocks the parents from eating korban pesach if he doesn't have a milah. So the Gemara says, "V'nei tov le kol shiva." He has to wait 7 days. The halacha is that when a child is born and they're sick, so they have to wait, depending on what type of sick, but they have to wait 7 days from when they heal. From when they're, it happens a lot. Children are born and they have to stay in the hospital. You don't give them a brit milah on the 8th day. You give them a brit milah on the 8th day from when they're healthy, from when they're off of any support or anything like that. So the Gemara says, you're right. The Ya'avinan le'kol shiva. We're talking about that he was given the full 7 days, meaning he was born. Okay, tov. He was born sick. So this child could not have a brit milah on time. They waited the 7 days, and the day that he's supposed to have a brit milah came out on the day of bringing the korban pesach. So the Gemara says, okay, v'nimuleh mitzafra. Why couldn't he get the brit milah in the morning before korban pesach?
Yeah.
So ba'inan meid leit. You need exactly we need 7 days made late, which means 7 24-hour periods. So the case is that he was sick. He became healthy, let's say, at 3 p.m. So you need to, on the 8th day, at 3 p.m., you have to wait 7 24-hour periods. Then you could give him the Brit Milah. So when they were bringing the Korban Pesach, that was before 3 p.m. It was not yet the Zman where he would be allowed to have a Milah, and therefore it wasn't that he's not considered an Arel, and they could bring the Korban Pesach. But after 3 p.m., later on that night, when they want to eat, they have to give him a Brit Milah before they can eat, because now it's Zman for him to have Brit Milah.
I thought it was just the 8th day. I didn't know it had to be.
No, it is for a regular born child. But when someone is sick and they become healthy, you have to wait 7 24-hour periods from when they become healthy.
Oh, so an extra.
So if a child is
it's
born,
potentially an extra 7 days, but or if it's in the middle.
Yeah, if a child is born, if a child is if a child is in the ICU for 2 months, you have to, once they're healthy and they come out, you have to wait 7 24-hour periods. It's not just the 8th day of when they
This is
come
halacha.
off. This is halacha l'maaseh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll stop here, B'ezras Hashem.